Hi, welcome to another Translator Insider. This week we continue talking about ethical issues and ethics in translation, and we will be discussing the issue of culturally fluent translations because sometimes there is a little of a misconception that to be accurate, a translation needs to be done word by word, and that obviously doesn't work. And if you are a translator, you know that that is true, that it doesn't work like that. But in this insider, I will explore that, and I will be talking about how to make your translations culturally fluent. So stick around. So let's talk accuracy. If you are a translator, or even if you are starting out as a translator, you know that one of the main objectives of our job is to be accurate and to provide our clients with an accurate translation that reflects the original message, what they have provided us with. And obviously, we need to be accurate to that. We need to transfer that message. That's our job, is just transferring the message from one language to another. And obviously, we have to do it in an accurate way. So the message has to have exactly the same impact. I have already explained this in several videos and articles that I've wrote about this issue. You have to the message has to have exactly the same impact. That's why, for example, when you translate or if you accept a job that has swearing words in it, or a little bit of an offensive language, if you accept the job, you have to translate it the way it is, because you have to have exactly the same impact on the target audience as the one you had on the source audience. So and this is one of the points we have in our code of ethics, and is one of the main points of translation. And this is why it is so important to explain all these things, so people also understand the job of a translator, that is not just converting from one language to another, because you need to know how to do it, and you need to know exactly how to pass that message effectively and accurately. And sometimes there is tricky things in your way, and you have to be a little creative, because I must admit, in my experience, and I work with English and Portuguese, that happens quite a lot actually, because there is words in English that basically have no direct translation in Portuguese. And another thing is, and if you are a translator that works with Portuguese, you know this, Portuguese tends to expand from the English language. So sometimes a sentence that can be said in 4 or 5 words in English will have to be extended to sometimes 8 or 10 words in Portuguese, exactly because of that. Some words may not have a direct translation. Some verbal forms that are used in English may have to be used in another verbal form in Portuguese, and so on and so forth. And that's why we need to be first of all, we really need to know the both cultures that we are working with, because, for example, and I'm taking the example of Portuguese. If you take the example of Portuguese from Brazil, sometimes it is easier, less trickier, because a lot of the evolution of the language in Brazil was highly influenced by the American English, and sometimes a lot of words used in Brazil are direct translations of American words, and even the verbal forms they use the equivalent, for example, of the present perfect, past perfect. So if you are translating an English sentence with the present perfect or past perfect, it would just be almost a direct translation. Whilst in Portuguese, from Portugal, that's not possible because those verbal forms are not used commonly or fluently. So, and that's one of the main challenges of our profession, and that's what makes it so challenging and so interesting. It's that sometimes you have a word that simply doesn't have a translation, and you have to be creative to translate it and pass the message to your target audience in a way that they understand what the original text intended to say. But obviously you need to be fluent, and sometimes you need to adapt the text in a way that that message is passed accurately. Another thing is, for example, idiomatic expressions, and that happens with every language. You cannot translate them word by word. Does not work. It won't make sense. Most of the times it won't make sense in your target language, and therefore you need to find an equivalent idiomatic expression. There is dictionaries for that. I've got a few, and you have to establish that connection. And that is the main thing. We have to establish the connection between the two cultures and the two languages. Some people may think that the job of a translator is quite easy because it's just, pick up one word and put it in another language and Bob's your uncle, is done. Well, it's not like that. Sometimes we spend, a fair bit of time thinking and rethinking that text in a way that we are doing it accurately, but we are doing it culturally fluent, which means that that text is actually going to be read and understood by the target audience as if it was originally wrote in their own language. And that's the purpose. That's the purpose of a translation. It's that the target audience reads that text, and for them, it is as fluent as if it was written by a native, as if it was written originally for them and for their country. So you need to adapt sometimes. And sometimes there's simply not another way of doing things, and sometimes you have to add a translator's note saying that there is not a direct translation and explain what it is. Sometimes when they refer to a certain thing or something like that you cannot do it any other way, well, you have to recur to translator's notes. So and that's the reason why word by word does not work. There is a lot of things that make it impossible. Idiomatic expressions, the fact that some words do not have a direct translation, and that's the job of the translator to make that connection. That's our job. We need to pick up the source text, read it, understand it, and then make that connection between the two cultures, between the two languages, making sure that we pass the message exactly the same way, having exactly the same impact, because that would be our accuracy there. We have to be loyal to the source text. However, it needs to be culturally fluent. So sometimes there is cultural traces, things like that need to be explained in order for our target audience to understand it. And that's our job. Identify those little traces, those little words that do not have a direct translation, or those idiomatic expressions and things like that, and translate them or explain them or adapt the text in order to make sense and pass exactly the same message. That's our goal. We do not alter the text. This will not be altering the text because that would be going against our code of ethics. This is simply making it accurate in that particular language. And sometimes we need to adapt it. It is part of our job. If a word does not have a translation, we need to translate it somehow. We can't just leave it out, because that would be omitting, and omissions are not a good thing in translation. As you know, if we're going to take a word, we may lose the sense of the entire sentence. So this is how we do it. We have to analyze the text, we must study the text and know and make the connection between the two cultures and the two languages, in order to make exactly the same statement, in order to make exactly the same effort and the same impact on them, however, in a way that is fluent and that is culturally accepted. And that's all for today. I hope you liked this insider of today. I hope you really enjoyed it, and it gave you a little bit of an insight of what actually is an accurate translation and how to do it accurately without jeopardizing fluency and jeopardizing the way it's going to be perceived in the target audience, because that's very, very important. If you are there, if you have been faced with this type of challenge and you want to share, maybe give us an example of a very, very, very tricky translation that you had to make, and you had to research and try to arrange the text in order to be accurate and cultural fluent at the same time. Please share with us. It's always important to have examples and have your experience, because it makes all of this more interesting and useful, I think. And share the video with all your translators and non-translated friends, so they learn a little bit about this profession, and they learn actually what we do in our job. And subscribe the channel, like the channel, subscribe the channel, and click on the bell so you get a notification every week, anytime a new insider is published. Before I go, I would like to thank you all for watching. See you next week. Have a good one. Bye.